website as well. And so this will give a sort of a narration to the presentation that I already have up there. So let me just do that. So just so everyone knows that I am recording at this point. Okay. And so again, this is I mean, just take a look at that picture, folks. I mean, that's the back view of our school. I challenge anybody to have that sort of a view going forward. And I think it is really, really important that we see that our motto is because we believe. It's not just a motto. It's not just something that's placed in our agenda books. It is the truth of the thing, because some people will say, well, why? Like, why do you do this? Why is this school like this? Why is it so much different than other places? Why? The answer is because we believe. Because we believe it's a better way for students to learn. Because we believe this is the way it should be. And so it takes some work, but it's well worth it for sure. So we had our prayer there. I will say that again, this presentation is in the is on the website. This is a link that'll bring you right to this whole application process. There's a booklet that the TCDSB has put together. It's on the board website, but this is a link that's directly to it as well. So just when you go through it, just here's the time frame for the way things work out. And this is really, really important. There's a couple key ones here. If you notice here, Monday, November 1st, the applications to the regular program are entered. This is coming up, right? This is Monday, right? And so we want to make sure that people are applying. And this is why it's great that you're here tonight. You've maybe gone to a few other schools, and now you've been to the best one and you saved it for last, obviously, and that's good for you. And now you're going to have it fresh in your mind about how to apply to us. Just understand too, there's an important right here at the beginning where it says the initial deadline date, specialty programs, applications for the regular programs are due on that date. Anything after that is put on the waiting list. So if you were to put in your application on Wednesday, November the 3rd, or the following week, or a month from now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get in. It just really drastically reduces the chances of getting into the school you want, because you're going to be put on the waiting list. Please do understand that Mary Ward is not a specialty school or a specialty program. Some people would assume that it is. It's not. It's a regular community school, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But that means that it's not really involved in the wave 1 or 2 timelines at all. And so if admissions to Mary Ward, you would be getting those down here by January the 13th. And January the 13th is when we would be giving out all the acceptances. So you'll be looking forward into that point. And then we will communicate after that point about registration. So admissions is one thing. You would accept, you'll get an email, and we'll go through all that process here. You would get an email, and then when you accept that, we then take that list of people who are accepted, then we'll send out registration packages, and we'll go through that process. I wish I could give you more details about that, but because of COVID, last year was much different. We're hoping that it won't be as detached. Last year, everything had to be virtual and everything had to be submitted virtually, and we were, chasing our tails a little bit there. My hope is that we can be much more in person. We can have a much more personal touch to that registration process to alleviate some of the anxiety that's bound to come when you're making these big choices, for sure. So the first thing you're going to do is to be able to create an account. And this is where that good question comes from before, right? Is that for TCDSB students, so for those students who are in elementary schools that were within the Toronto Catholic District School Board, your account is pretty much already created there. You can go in, you're going to be using an email address that is already on file. That's really, really important. So if you go in and you cannot get in properly, you should go check with your child's elementary school to make sure that they have on file the email address that you're going to use. That's really, really important. If you're coming from outside of the TCDSB, so if you're in the TDSB, absolutely you can apply to our school. You would just have to create your account. And so that means that a lot of the information, well, all of the information that they're going to require as far as personal information and contact information, you'll have to fill out. Obviously, we don't have that yet. If you're in one of our elementary schools, that's already pre-populated, and you'll get a chance to just check to make sure it's all accurate. But that doesn't mean that one application is weighed more highly than the other. It just means that we have to gather that information. So this is your first step. I assume that probably if you've engaged in this process, you've already begun this. You may already have an account. at this date. But it's really, really important that you make sure that you're using the email that your child's elementary school has, if you're in our board, if you're in the TCDSB. And then you'll be asked to activate your account. So they'll send you an email and you activate it. It's a kind of a two-step security process. And so it's probably a good idea to do that right away. So as you're setting up your account and getting it all ready, that you check that email right away, activate your account so you're ready to go. And then you're going to be putting in information as, again, if you're in the TCDSB school, you'll just be checking this information to make sure it's accurate. If you have to create an account, so if you're from outside of our board, then you will have to create all of the information that's here, and it'll walk you through step by step, all of those processes that you're in there. Again, just to pay attention to the fact that for the TCDSB students, again, you are going to be going to the regular program. So there's a few steps here. If you're within our board and you go to an elementary school that is outside of your boundary, so for instance, maybe you're in a special program, or maybe you moved in the last year and so your child still attends a school, you're going to have two choices. You can either choose the elementary school that your child goes to right now, or you can choose the elementary school that is your home school based on your address. You can choose either one of those. That's what the law, the Ontario law, not TCDSB law. This is the law and the Education Act around Ontario. It dictates that you can choose either one of those as your home school, for lack of a better word, your community school. And you might do that based on, for lack of a better word, I suppose, strategy. If one of these is closer to Mary Ward, then you would choose that one. If you really want to get into Mary Ward, and that would make it easier. The way our admissions policy works is we are tasked with the idea of where to accept students based on concentric circles. So those whose are elementary schools are closest to us, we take, and then we must sort of move outward from there. Because we don't have a specialty program per se, we don't get to pick and choose. We just take those that are the closest to our school. And so that really does matter what elementary school you choose if you have the choice. Now, if you go to the elementary school that is your community school, then you won't have any different choice. But it might, based on your address and based on the address of your elementary school. Our Mary Ward offers that regular program. That's something that you could check, or the extended French program. And again, the extended French program, and if you have some questions about that, we have teachers online who can speak to that as well. But our extended French program means that you do, in the grade 9 year anyway, you do French, but you also take geography and religion in French. And so that's the extended French program. That's not a specialty program, that's just one of our extra programs. We do not have French immersion. So you would either click either the regular program or the extended French, depending on which you choose. And then you would obviously choose Mary Ward there. And then the other rule is that we do have a sibling rule. And what the sibling rule basically states is that if your child who's entering grade 9 has an older sibling who will be attending Mary Ward in that year, so will be attending Mary Ward in the 2022-2023 school year, your child automatically will have admission if you so choose to send them there. If the older child is currently in grade 12 and will be graduating, that sibling rule is no longer in effect. So it doesn't matter where you live in that situation. If an older sibling will be attending the school the following year, then we will automatically admit the younger child to the school. So that's a TCDSB rule. It applies to every school. If the TCDSB cannot place your child, so say you choose another school, I don't know why you would, but maybe you would choose another school as your first choice, and then you would put Mary Ward as your second choice. And in your first choice, you don't get into that school. Some people would assume, well, then I'll just get into Mary Ward. That's not necessarily the case. The TCDSB's redirection policy says that when you apply for your first school, and then you apply for your redirection choice. If you put Mary Ward, that's fine. The problem is that we don't process redirections until well after that January date. So the only way that you would get into Mary Ward at that point is if there was still room. And just so you know, there hasn't been room in the last few years. So putting Mary Ward as a second, and some people get disappointed, so they put some other school, they don't get admitted into that specialty program or whatever it is, or that whatever. And then they say, well, I'll for sure get into Mary Ward because I put it second, not necessarily. And then they're disappointed because then the board will say, well, we'll find you a school, but it might not be either one of those because Mary Ward pretty much every year fills up in the regular program. So if you want to guarantee a spot, then I would definitely try to, if you want to improve your odds anyway, is make sure it's the first choice. And I'm not just saying that, I'm just saying that I don't want to have awkward conversations later on in the year when we're saying, sorry, there is no room for you. It's really, really important. You'll get to a certain screen where it says, I give permission, and this is consent, that you click yes. It basically just says that it gives you're giving the elementary school the right to give us information, to have conversations with us. We have what's called exchange of information. And that's really important that you give them the right to have those conversations with us. And that goes for if you're in the TDSB or the TCDSB or any of the other boards, we need to have that information because technically you're not one of our students until you actually show up. So we don't really have, without your permission, the right to access that information until you give us that permission. So when you give us that permission, then we're able to do that. So that's really, really important. It's a legal thing. It's a little button to press, but it's a super important one. So please make sure you do. This is responding to that offer. So when you get that, here's the key: is you can only accept one offer. So let's just say you applied to one of the specialty programs, and that you're going to hear about in late November. You're going to hear you might get accepted into those programs in late November and December. And you might say, well, I'll accept it. And then if Mary Ward, gives me an offer in January, then I'll take that. That's not possible. So as soon as you accept an offer, you're taken off every list that you're on otherwise. So as soon as you hit that button that says I accept, you're taken off of our list, off of our waiting list, off of our, number one picks, off of every list, other than the school that you pick. So you need to know that ahead of time because the specialty programs get populated first. If you pick that thinking, well, that's a good program, but I really want to get into Mary Ward, then you should wait to get to Mary Ward. I would suggest at that point, if you even want to call the school, call us just to get verification on that. You don't want to make a mistake on that one because it's really hard for us. It's impossible because your name is literally taken off. We don't even know you exist at that point. They take you away from us entirely. So that's really important for that second one, that you understand that these offers, the specialty programs come much earlier than the regular program. And again, we are just a Mary Ward regular program. You won't know from us until January. So it's probably a good idea to keep in touch with us if you have questions in regards to that. So you're not making an impertinent click to accept something. The regular program notification, like we said, will come in January. You'll get an email that looks something like this that has the name on it, and then you'll get a chance to select and accept that offer. And so let me just go back one. That's a really important email. Everything is going to be done through the email. So it's super, super important that the email that you put on there, or that if you're in the TCDSB already, that you're checking to make sure that that's an email that you check regularly, that you check all the time. It's super important that you're doing what you need to do with that. That you're putting the right email, that you're checking on it, because that's all the communication is going to come that way. You're not going to get a phone call from us. If you call us, we're going to say you have to check that email because this is how it's sent out. It's not even sent by us. We just sort of accept, and then the program does it all for us. So it's really, really important that you understand what email address these are going to, that you check your email securities in there, that if it's going into the trash or it's being redirected into like a junk mail folder, make sure that you allow it into your main inbox, because that's the main communication. That's an entire communication. I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment there in case there are questions about that process. And I know there's lots of questions that are coming up, but is there something that's coming up that people might want to comment on? Maybe Ms. Burley, who's head of our guidance department, may want to add anything to it, or if there is like experience from the past that might have come up that you might want to add something to it. Looks like here there's there's a question about students from out of bounds schools. Will they be accepted? I don't know what an out of bounds school is. If you're talking about schools that are outside of Toronto, so there is, because we're so far north, there is a possibility that students who live in York region, for instance, might be applying to us. it's important to note there that those students are put in what's called a priority 6. So there's different priority levels when it comes to admissions. Anyone who's living outside of Toronto, because of their tax structure, they're put onto priority 6. I can't access any of those students. I can't accept any of those students until after the January 12th deadline. So well after that, a few weeks after that anyway. So we would have to process everybody who's on ours, everybody who's on our waiting list, and sort of figure that out. And then only at that point can I take off of that priority 6, because obviously, because of the way publicly funded education works in the province of Ontario, it's drawn from your property taxes. And so where you put those property taxes is going to fund the schools. And so you have to make sure that the people who are living in Toronto get serviced first. We got to make sure that they have a placement and then go forward from there. Please know that the Toronto Catholic Board is a fully funded board. What that means is that we accept everybody. You don't have to be Catholic to attend Mary Ward Catholic Secondary School. You do not. Because we're fully funded, we accept everyone. Obviously, those schools that are closest to us are the ones that we will accept first. That's those concentric circles. Obviously, there's probably an ease of going from our elementary, from the TCDSB elementary schools into our secondary schools. There's a little bit of an ease of transition there, for sure. And there's a comfortability there as well. But if you're in the TDSB, it's still very much possible for you to attend our school. Absolutely, for sure. Anything else, folks, my staff here, anything that they wanted to add, or any good questions that are coming up? There's a question here. Is it common that redirection occurs if you've chosen the two closest options of the school, obviously Mary Ward being first? So I'll give you a scenario. So a student chooses us second and chooses another school. Well, the closest one is Francis Lieberman. So they choose Francis Lieberman first. It's a smaller school than ours. And they don't get into Francis Lieberman for whatever reason. Then they would assume that they're getting into Mary Ward. The problem is that the redirection happens after we've done all of our processing, right? After we've processed all of those people who've chosen us first. In the past few years, and I think that the pattern has been, is that we get more applications than we have spots. The board gives me a number that says this is how many grade 9s you can take, because they don't want one school becoming hugely overpopulated and another school not. And we just don't have the facilities to accommodate any more. We don't have portables on our campus. We're not actually allowed to have portables on our campus because our grounds are actually City of Toronto grounds. And so the deal that the board struck many years ago is that we're not allowed to actually have any portable classrooms on our campus. So we're kind of stuck at that number, right? We're not going to get any bigger. So if you put us as a second choice, when the board says we'll redirect you to a school, they'll come, hey, Mary Ward, do you have room? We'll say, no, we do not. They'll say, okay, then they'll find a school, the closest school to your house that does have room. And it might not be a school that you chose at all. And so please don't assume that just because you put us as second, or if it was reversed, if you put us first and then put Francis Lieberman or someone else second, that you're going to get into that school. So it's important that you're making the right choice. It's really important that you do put a redirect in there, but you understand that process as well. Okay. So if we look close to Mary Ward, we have a good chance of getting accepted into the school. Yes or no? Yes, you do. Yes, absolutely. And relative closeness, I suppose. I don't know what close is. I mean, if you live on McNichol here, then yeah, you're in. You're pretty much guaranteed. But there's questions in regards to that, and feel free to call the school and ask some of those questions. I mean, you all have my email address because I sent you the email, the link, so you can ask me those. We can get into that. What determines your accommodations of one student over the other when Mary Ward is the first choice? That's an excellent question. Basically, it really is in that you'll see one of those screens that will say, based on your elementary school, this is the schools that are closest to you. And it actually says there's an equation in there, not an equation, but there's a direct measurement of how far your elementary school that you pick as your home school is from that school. So we basically get that report and we say, okay, let's keep going out until I get to whatever my number is. And I think it's usually around 250 grade 9 students. And I'll just keep taking until I get to 250. That's how it goes. And there's some questions about, is there an admission policy? Is there a test you have to do to get into Mary Ward? Is it kind of like a private school? Is it a special school? No, it's a community school. And so that's how we choose based on where you go to elementary school. So is there anything else that anyone's seeing in regards to admission questions?
Mike, there are some questions about feeder schools. So how would they know if they are one of our feeder schools?
Again, the Toronto Catholic District School Board isn't like, for instance, the Toronto District School Board. The Toronto District School Board has very, very strict boundaries and feeder schools. The Toronto Catholic does not. Toronto Catholic says you can apply to anywhere you want. There is no, like in the Toronto District School Board, they tell you if you go to this elementary school, you're going to this high school, no matter what. That's not the way our board works, is they say that you can apply to any school you want, but understand that the schools will choose based on location, distance of the elementary school from the high school. That's how the process works. So there isn't a list of feeder schools. There's basically just a geographic list, and that exists on the board website. You can go to the board website and see geographically where all the schools are relative to Mary Ward. If you have a specific question you can ask, you could probably ask, the best starting point would be to ask probably your child's elementary school principal and even grade 8 teacher and say, listen, is it? Because they'll know, yeah, a bunch of our kids always go to Mary Ward. That's just, the history of it. The principal will definitely have a better idea about, yeah, we're kind of in that area closest to it. And you can understand why that would be an issue, because obviously there are schools that are equal distant to us, and us and Francis Lieberman are so close to each other that there's schools that are kind of in the middle between us, right? And there's schools that overlap. So if we were to give you a list of 12 elementary schools that we regularly take from, I would say at least 5 or 6 of those are shared by Mary Ward. I know a couple of them are shared by St. John Paul II. Some of them are probably shared by St. Joan of Arc as well. That's just the way it works. This is what happens with a city like Toronto, an older city like Toronto that's grown in different patterns and in different ways. It's not as clean and planned out so that they have, as they grow, we'll build another school in the exact same spot. It's not that much of a grid. So that's what happened. And so that's the regulations that go with that. So it's not as clean, but it does allow choice when it comes to from parents and for students to make those choices, but to make a good choice, right? Obviously, is to figure out what that is. And I just don't want anybody to be disappointed if they put a second and assume it's going to happen. It might not. The best scenario is if you want to make sure that they come to Mary Ward, put us first. That's the one thing I can say that you can control, is to say, if you put us first, that'll give you the best shot. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but it'll give you the best shot. It's pretty close to a guarantee, but it's I don't want to say that. And then, obviously, if we get 500 applicants, we can't take 500 students. We have to be responsible when it comes to some of that news that we give you. Okay.
Mike, I had a question sent directly to me about, and I apologize if this has been covered. If they've applied to a specialty school, but they actually now want Mary Ward, do they have to reply to the specialty school right away, or can they wait until they hear from us afterwards and then make a decision?
The specialty schools, if you don't respond, so the specialty schools will take responses in November and then in December. And then for the most part, most of those schools will close those specialty programs at that point, right? They won't have any more admissions unless there's a few maybe straggling points. By the time you get to us, which is January, I think it was 13th this year, those specialty programs have probably filled up. So it's a tough choice to make for sure. But that's why I would encourage you to have conversations, to reach out and to say, kind of where are we? This is the elementary school I go to. If I understand, if I put that first, what does that look like? What does that mean? It's important to understand that. Remember, when you're choosing, you can choose a specialty school and then your first choice regular school. right? So don't think that if we apply to a specialty program, like, you know, the IB program at St. John Paul II, and I use that only because I've been there for the last little while. If you choose that, that doesn't count as necessarily your first choice. You can choose that and then a first choice regular school. So you could choose that one and the regular school as far as us, but you will have to choose, if you get into that program, you will have to choose that. And if you choose it, then you'll be off of our list. If you say no, or you just don't respond, I suppose, then when ours comes in January 13th, you would take, if you took us, then you would be off of their list. That's how it works. You can't choose one and then switch. If you have a sibling that graduated from Mary Ward, will my second child be automatically admitted? No. The only way the sibling rule is in effect is if that sibling, that older sibling, will be enrolled in the school in September of 2022. A graduate does not count. And that isn't a Mary Ward rule, that is a TCDSB rule in regards to siblings. Do you have any classes? Yes, we do. We have a thriving ISP DDME program as well. We have representatives on the call now who can speak to that program for sure, if anybody has questions about that. So there's lots of...
Yeah, I can talk, Mike, if that helps.
Sure, absolutely.
So my name is Anne-Marie Davies. I'm the acting department head right now in special education. We do have an MEDD program. It offers alternative courses for students with multiple exceptionalities or developmental delays. They are also integrated into the regular courses, their pathway. So they may be Ontario Secondary School Certificate bound, or COA bound, or diploma bound, and they range in grade and ability. And those students do stay for 7 years in high school till the year they turn 21.
Do understand though, again, when it comes to that program, the ISP program, those aren't really taken as admissions. That is handled centrally at the board. The board through the board special services programs at the board will consult with parents, understand the child's needs, and then place them at an appropriate school based on geography. Obviously, we don't want you going to the other side of the city, but also based on the type of program that's offered and sometimes the physical capabilities of the school, depending on what are the needs of the child, depending on the level of academic ability that they may or may not have, depending on the functional abilities that they may or may not have. There are special programs that are designed in each school that has an ISP program. And so the board will centrally place those. That's not really part of this process. You would be working with people at the board to make that happen. I see that Ms. Zabana has put a presentation in there. I think that was the presentation that was delivered to the grade 8s. So Ms. Zabana was one of our guidance counselors. She might be able to speak to that program.
Yeah, so the presentation I shared, maybe many of your children have already seen it and have access to it, but I thought I would share it here. It does give a few more details about, for example, our OASIS program, which is a great transition program that's run by our senior students to kind of welcome our grade 9s. So there's a great video on there that would be a good one to watch. It also goes through some extracurriculars that we offer, and then what grade 9 courses you could choose from when it comes to electives. There are some descriptions of each course there. So just a little bit more information if you wanted to take the time to go through. Thanks.
There is a question about the uniform. Our uniform is pretty standard in relation to everybody else. We use RJ McCarthy's uniform. It's the gray pants. There's a kilt option for the girls. There's 2 different colored shirts. There's like a sort of a blue and a red, I guess. I don't even know what's called, maroon maybe sort of color. There's different options that go with that. I would say I'll give you my admin response when it comes to uniform. I would say the #1 factor for a safe school, one of the best tools for safe schools, is a uniform. It's great that we're able to identify those students who are supposed to be in the school and are supposed to be here. Obviously, that's a good thing. It also helps with things like social realities, bullying, and those sorts of things. Equity, it's a great equity tool. And the fact that everyone's wearing a similar uniform, you don't have to be constantly competing to have the newest style, the newest overpriced fashion item. That's a huge thing. And it does also require that students, do things a little bit more authentic to make their personality come through, to make their identity, and not just buying, the newest fashion trends. And so it's there, it's available. We also have assistance programs. We have a really well-stocked, gently used uniforms, and we're looking at maybe working with our student council to have like a uniform swap or a uniform sale of used items, but we have those as well. And we do have partnerships with RJ McCarthy's, the company, for those families that may have some financial need. We can help to arrange so that those are free of costs, depending on that. Yeah, that you would have to contact me directly. But there is no reason, I don't want to stress this enough, that there shouldn't be a financial reason to not come to one of our Catholic schools. There's definitely not a financial reason to not come to Mary Ward. Please do not let that be a choice, right? We will help to facilitate whatever the need is. If you want your child to come here and that's a choice that you're willing to make, finances is not an issue. We will do what we can. We do ask for things like an activity fee that will help us to do some of the things that we do with the constantly dwindling budget that the ministry keeps sort of pulling back from us. We depend on that, but obviously for those who are in need, we wouldn't be charging that, and we would be able to figure out a way to make everything work. Finances is not a reason to not think about coming to Mary Ward. There's a few questions that were asked ahead of time, and I wouldn't mind getting to those as well. So let me just share my screen yet again. People are probably sick of this process, but we'll do it nonetheless. And so some of the questions that came up ahead of time. Is there an interview process? What type of student is the school best suited for in terms of learning style? What grades do I need to get into Mary Ward? Again, there is no grade that you need to get into Mary Ward. There is no selection process. We're not going to take people out based on their grades. The selection process is based on where you live. It is a community school. What type of student is the school best suited for? Some would argue, some would say, well, if you're super organized and if you're a self-starter and if you're self-motivated, then you're good for that. I don't know a whole lot of teenagers or 14-year-olds, or I guess you're 13 if you're considering it now, who would probably describe themselves that way. And if you were already like that, then I don't know what the point of the school is, right? If we're going to teach you those things, if we're going to help to bring those things out, I would say the best type is someone who's open to new experiences, right? Someone who's open to trying something and isn't married to the idea that this is the way things are because you've been in a school a certain way. The point of this school is that we will help you, whether through experience, whether through guidance, whether through advocacy, whether through direct instruction. We're going to help you become that self-directed student. We're going to bring it out in you. And so if you're open to that, that's the best type. Don't think you have to be already a Mary Ward student. You already have to be all of these things to succeed here. I would say some of the best success stories, and I can't see my staff right now. I can't see them, sorry, because I'm sharing my screen, but I hope their heads are nodding up and down saying, yeah, when I remember my biggest success, it wasn't the kid who came who was already Mary Ward. It's the ones who found that within themselves. And that's the point of school. I would argue that if you're already there, then you don't really need us. If you're open to it, you're welcome for sure at Mary Ward. Wondering if any homeschooled students have transitioned into this high school. There has. I mean, I remember from my teaching point, there was a few that were for sure. A lot of kids will come to us from private schools or from homeschooling situations, probably because parents they like the idea of some of the structures, particularly the structure of the TA, right? That you have somebody who's there, who's sort of looking out for you in a much more local, a small group way. Remember, a student is in a TA group with 17 or 18 other students, and they're in that group the entire time that they're in high school. And so they really have this relationship, and that teacher gets to really focus and dig deep on that relationships with those kids. And so you're already in a group, right? You already have a crew when you show up. So people do like that. any special requirements to transfer from a TDSB school to a TCDSB school. Can a student with both parents non-Catholic attend TCDSB secondary school? Do you have any specialized programs in STEM? Yeah, there is no special requirement. It's just that you apply. And remember, applying to a TCDSB school doesn't jeopardize your TDSB placement. They have no idea that you're applying to us, and we have no idea who else you applied to in that form. Obviously, as soon as if you accept one, you can't accept two. You can't be on two rosters at the same time. There isn't anything like that. Can a student who both parents are non-Catholic? Yes, you can attend publicly funded high school, and that's what we are. Absolutely. Do you offer any specialized program in STEM? We have our nonprofit specialist high skills major program is a STEM related one, STEAM related. And Miss Albert, who's on the call as well, is head of the math department, has done a lot of work on that, has done an information night on that, and the video of that information night, all that information is contained within the website as well, so you can go and explore that as well. Some other questions that came ahead of time. Is it hard to go to your classes considering how big the school is? And I think this is obviously coming from an elementary perspective, and the school is larger obviously than any elementary school, but I would say that there's a very local feeling. There's kind of for lack of a better word, a cozy feeling to Mary Ward, probably because of that TA program, right? You have somebody who's looking out for you. You have senior students that are looking out for you. I mean, I don't know if it doesn't exist in any school where on that first day or two, you're meeting seniors, and you're meeting seniors who are kind of your older brothers and sisters, for lack of a better word, who are going to help guide you through that. So the large nature of the school, I think it kind of shrinks at Mary Ward. Resources and structures for children with challenges such as ADHD and autism. Does the school have a program placement for grade 9 students and autism? Ms. Davies already did speak to that program. Again, depending on the level of need and exceptionality that your child has, like I said, if they're currently in a multiple exceptionality or an intensive support program in the elementary school, that will be handled by the board. They'll be placed at a secondary school, perhaps ours, perhaps one of the other amazing programs that are offered at the other neighboring schools. But if they do have just like an IEP program currently in their elementary school, we support that absolutely. If you are coming from a TCDSB school, that program will automatically forward on to us. We'll get all that information and we'll be able to do that. If you're coming from a TDSB school or another school outside of our board, you'll have to volunteer some of that information. I would highly, highly, highly encourage you to make sure that we're aware of your child's needs right away so that we can get on that. We can get the paperwork done, obviously, but then we can put the supports in place. Like my oldest, who just graduated from high school and is currently attending college out in Durham, he had a program of study. He had an IEP his entire time. It was invaluable. If for no other reason than for some specific things, like even like EQAO testing, like the OSSLT, the literacy test, which is a mandatory graduation requirement, you get all sorts of different accommodations with that identification, but you also get supports and different accommodations that are allowable based on that. So it's a really good idea to make sure that we have all the information that you can offer. Like I said, if you're coming from a Toronto Catholic District elementary school, we'll get that automatically. Because this is self-directed learning, there's a whole bunch of questions that come from this, and it stems from that one on the bottom. Because this is a self-directed learning, do the teachers only give out the work in the morning and then leave the room like they don't teach anything? Everything is to be read by the students from the book only. That's, I would say, the furthest thing from the point. And that's one of those misconceptions that a lot of people have. And people used to say that to me. Other teachers at other schools used to say, well, you teach at Mary Ward, that school where you don't teach. And my response was always, that's interesting because all I do is teach. At a regular school, a teacher spends a lot of their time doing a bunch of things so that the teaching can happen, right? They have to do stuff like, photocopying and all these sorts of things, and they have to distribute books, and they have to take back books, and they have to manage all these resources, and they have to do a lot of classroom management as far as discipline and those sorts of things to make sure that the lesson happens. Really, teachers, when Mary Ward is fully functioning in its self-directed program, don't do any of that stuff. We have education, we have instructional assistants who help with a lot of that instruction in regards to organization of resources and materials and all those things. And so really much more time of a Mary Ward teacher is spent teaching. And sometimes very, very individually. The other part to that is in a conventional school where you have your 30 students who are sitting in front of you, that you have to engage with them that entire time for that hour and a half, or you might look at it as for only the hour and a half. But in Mary Ward, because of that self-directed program, if a student says, listen, I'm good, I understand all this, I don't need to engage with you on this at all, this assignment, then I don't need to spend my time engaging with that student. I'll spend it with the one, if I only have 20 minutes in this given time, I don't need to split it between the students who already understand it and the students who don't. I get to spend all of it on the ones who don't. And so if organized properly, then it works out, I would say, much better. How are the students scheduled, controlled in general? The students control, but then the students also in the day-to-day, they'll make their own schedule, but they vet it through their TA. So their TA looks at their schedule every morning and says, okay, yeah, listen, you've been going here. You haven't gone to English in the last few weeks. You have to go there. You haven't been there in a while. Come on, we know we were falling behind there. This is where we have to go. Or they start to, when I was a TA, I would say, no, here we go. I'm going to make your schedule for today. This is where you're going. Let's make sure. So there is a check and balance there for sure. What's the difference between self-directed program versus the regular program? How to motivate the students to be self-directed? Well, there's a lot of differences between the self-directed program and the regular program. And not just the timing stuff. So the timing is huge. Obviously, the fact that they get to make their own timetables, the fact that they choose their own deadlines, for lack of a, basically, that they're the ones who decide when they're going to write a test. They're the ones who decide, where they work on things and how they engage in these things. They're the ones who are going to say, like, when they go to the teacher to get help. That's great, and that's timing. But there's also this other element where, because of that freedom that it allows, it allows the students to then say, okay, I'm not only going to choose when I do this, but I'm going to choose what I do. And I'm going to choose how I approach these. And as they evolve and as they mature as learners, you'll see the teachers give up some more of that control and give it to the students and say, okay, you tell me how you want to accomplish this task, or you tell me how you want to meet this expectation. And I think that's when it's at its best. And that's when you know that you had a really interesting experience as a student. And I think you are so much more prepared for what the world is going to ask of you. Those sort of factory or company jobs that are just go in and you punch that clock, those are going the way of the dodo, as they say. Those are kind of gone. And that now we have to have these people who are engaged, who are learners, who are moving from one task to another, who can self-motivate. You have so many people who, for instance, work from home or work remotely now. They have to be able to do those things on their own, and to be able to find out ways to network and to connect. So it's there. As a self-directed learning school, if a student needs one-on-one support with a teacher due to a roadblock in a specific subject area, will teachers be easily accessible to students? Yeah. And I would say that they're much more accessible than they would be in a normal school. In a normal school, they're very accessible for that hour and 15 minutes that they're on their schedule. And then they're almost not accessible at all for the rest of the day. But Mary Ward teachers have what we call a floor schedule when we're in the normal structure. And you can access them at those times. And there's and you might only need them for, like in that video that was talked about, that you might only need them for 10 minutes. You might need your teacher for 5 minutes. I got one question. I don't need to sit in that class for an hour and 15 minutes to get the answer to that one question. I just need this one thing clarified. I can go for 5 minutes and get that clarification. I go, okay, now I know what I'm doing. I'm good to go. But I need to spend a lot more time over in this area. And I need to have this one-on-one time with that teacher. It's really hard to have one-on-one time when you have 34 students sitting in front of you that you have to engage for an hour and 15 minutes. But when you have 3 or 4 that you have to be able to touch, and you can make that appointment with, and you can say, okay, I need to touch base with you guys for sure, it's easily done, or easier done at Mary Ward. Will students be familiarized before school starts with guidelines, processes, and strategies to be successful at self-directed learning? And then someone mentioned the Head Start program in 2022. That's absolutely the program, right? And so when you do accept when we offer you admission, and when you accept, and when we send back that admission package, one of those things is going to be for the Head Start summer program. And a lot of almost all of the high schools in the Toronto Catholic Board have a program like this. Not many people might know this, but our school was the first to have this. We did this long before anybody else did. I know because I was the summer school principal at the time that we started it. And so we worked with some great teachers who founded that program. A couple of the teachers are on this call right now, and started this idea about familiarizing them with Mary Ward, not only the building and the facilities and all those things, but with that self-directed program. So that's a really great and important program that happens for the month of July. My most sincere hope is that it will be in person this year, this coming summer. It's a credit, so you go full time every day for the month of July. There's a nominal fee, maybe there's a $20 fee that it will help with, like field trips and doing some events that are there. But you're in a credit too, which means you got a head start right out of the gate, like literally a head start, an academic head start. But you earn that credit and you learn about Mary Ward. You learn about the terminology, the Mary Ward lingo that exists here. But then you also learn some of those skills and you get that head start going into it. So that's a really important program. If and when you accept, of course, when you accept, why wouldn't you accept? When you accept our offer, that's going to be in that package, and make sure you sign up for that. Absolutely, 100%. What is the uniform policy? We already talked about that. It's a really, it's not too much different than any other school. You're kind of the golf shirt. There's sweater options. There's the gray pants or the kilt for the ladies, and black shoes, and all that will be in the package again when we send it to you. If you go to RJ McCarthy's on their website, it'll have all those details in there as well, and you can buy that as well. And like I said, we'll probably be, and hopefully be, advertising a used uniform sale, or some sort of a swap meet sort of thing that we can, because our students are already asking for it as well. What type of extracurriculars are provided? Other opportunities for study trips abroad? Lots of opportunities for extracurriculars. We're really excited because those have started in our schools now. We've had cross country already running. We have cross country runners going to OFSA next weekend. We have our girls field hockey has already gone on. Boys volleyball is starting up, have their first game next week. I think Monday, I think we're at it, I think right away. There's lots of things that are going on. Student council, like I talked about, there's the STEAM club, there's drama. I think Ms. Sosniak was in on some of the auditions, for the virtual auditions for the play and musical this year. There's lots of those opportunities. When you talk about study trips abroad, there's lots of, the history of the school is filled with those things, whether they be through music trips or other trips that are engaged in that. There's lots of different ones. We're looking forward to obviously being able to go back to those. They've been shut down for the last couple of years in regards to COVID, but my hope is that people that those things are starting to lighten up, and that we can look forward to more and more of those opportunities. Because there's some really amazing ones. I know that when I was a teacher here, we did, Miss Mack and myself, who's on the call, went and did a great trip to England and Scotland in 2002, I believe, and that was an amazing trip where we got to see Shakespeare's home and Wordsworth's grave and all these sorts of amazing places. So a great trip to go. And I think most of the teachers on the call are kind of harkening back to some of those amazing trips, and so those are some really great opportunities. I'd like to ask how the school handles bullying. Okay, I'll be very, very direct in how I deal with this. Is I have zero tolerance for any sort of bullying. There is no reason for that whatsoever, and I don't want anyone to think, well, because I'm a minor niner, I have to take my initiation. There is no initiation. That does not happen. I will not have that in any school that I'm involved in. There's no reason for it. Every student, no, every person in the school has the right to feel safe at all times. Anyone who is going to jeopardize someone feeling safe in that school will be removed from the school. I say that with no pleasure. I say that with in the past, when I've had to remove students from the school, I did not do it with any sort of glee or joy at all, but I also did it with no hesitation. Students need to feel safe. They don't need to feel comfortable and easy all the time at school. They need to be challenged. They need to be engaged. They need to risk things, and they need to really fail sometimes and succeed at other times. They don't need to feel unsafe. They need to be accepted no matter what is going on in their life, no matter what their gender identification is, no matter what their race is, no matter what their religion is, no matter what their sexual orientation is, no matter any of that part. They are going to be valued here. And like I said, I take that as without hyperbole, the most important part of my job is to make sure that that happens here. The best that I can say is that I will run every school that I am a principal at as if my children are students here. I can't promise you anything more than that. I can't pledge anything more than that, but that's how it's going to be. So I don't take those things lightly. I take school safety very, very seriously. But I would say a lot of the structures that are in place that are, have nothing to do with me or here long before I was ever here, are already addressing this stuff. Like I said, the idea that they're in a TA group with grade 11s and 12 students right away, that they have a crew that is existing of all these different grades right away, because they're not penned into rooms that are just about their grade, and because they get to have these experiences with so many other students, a lot of the stuff that would happen usually with bullying is not there. Am I going to say that there's no bullying? Is I going to say that there's none of that in the school? Any principal who says that there's none is lying to you. No, that's not the case. So that if it does get to my office, understand the way I'm going to deal with it and the way that it will be direct, and that I'll look to do everything to support those programs, like I said, like TA, those programs that help to alleviate those things in a proactive way. I'm going to support those at all costs. Those are all, I'm going to stop here. Those are all those questions those were the ones that were sort of sent ahead of time in the RSVP, and we were able to sort of mine through some of those. And I know I've been seeing people frantically typing here and responding to some of the questions. Was there anything else that came up in that staff that you would like to address, or that you think that I should address? Don't everybody jump in at once. Well, I would hope that what we have here, there's probably lots and lots of questions, absolutely, for sure. And I don't expect that you would have gotten all the answers right now. But like I said, what exists on that website is all of the stuff we've gone through there and so much more. You go into detail, find out what each of the departments do, find out what's available for your child, or for you, if your students are on this call, what's available here, ask around about that. Look into that website. It'll have the details about the application process, that, like I said, that presentation, and I'll put the audio to this video as well to that, so that you'll have that explanation that I had. That'll be in the website as well. We'll put everything in there. And so that you'll be able to really be able to access anything that you need from there. And then if you have questions at that point, please do reach out. Now, remember that the deadline is coming, right? November the 1st is Monday. And so you do need to put that in there. I would say don't panic about it, because you've probably already done some of the work. And some of the work is to go to the other open houses that might have been before us, for sure. Right, you want to be able to see everybody, and there's some amazing schools out there and some amazing programs for sure. And now you've gotten to us, and you're going to say, okay, given all of these things, this is the choices that we want to make. But you've got to make sure, because if your application, like I said, comes in on the Wednesday or the Thursday or the Friday of next week or a month from now, you'll be on our waiting list, and I cannot guarantee that we'll get to that waiting list. There's a very real possibility that the board's going to say to me, Mr. Wetzel, you can take 250 grade 9 students, and I'm going to get 300 people on our initial list, and then I'm pretty much done, right? I'll take those guys, and then we'll see who accepts. And then if you're waiting for the waiting list, don't make a timing mistake, right? Don't make that the issue. Make sure you're doing what you need to do. If you struggle with that, please give me a call. You can email me directly, and I can help walk you through that. I could even say, maybe we need to arrange for you to come on in if you're having issues with the tech. We can maybe arrange for an opportunity for you to come on into the school and get that done. But the clock is really ticking now. It's been ticking for a while. You've gone to these other events. Now you've come to us. Now you've got the chance to, the site's been open for a while anyway, but look at that site, look at it, find out the answers to the questions that you may have. If you don't have it there, ask around, ask us, so that you can make a really informed choice for that. I would say congratulations, because you've done the first step, right? You've come to this open house and you've considered Mary Ward. And a lot of people don't consider it because they're like, oh, that's that weird place. That's that place I've heard about. And they don't really know too much about it. learn about it. Like that's what a great thing. I would say to you, you know, when I accepted the job, like I said to you before, when I accepted that job in 1998, I kind of lied. I said I knew a lot about it. I just wanted to get a job, and it worked. I got a job, and that's one of those sliding door moments, right? That was the moment my life changed. And I don't say that with hyperbole. I don't say that as a selling point. I say it 100% accurately, and I think all these teachers are probably bored to death of hearing me say it over and over again. But my life changed the moment I walked into these doors. And my perception of what education should be drastically changed at that moment. And so I would say my best wish for you is that in 4 years, I see you graduate, and I'll be here in 4 years. I can pretty much guarantee you that. Well, I guess I can't guarantee you that, and that's pretty arrogant to assume that I know what's going to happen for the next 4 years of my life, especially after the last 2. But my plan is definitely to be here for pretty much the remainder of my career. And my hope is that I can shake your hand as you walk across that stage, and you might whisper to me, "You were right." That would be amazing. And to say that you're right, it changed me. And then that means it worked, right? No matter how you got there, that means it worked. And I would say, I would hazard a guess that Mary Ward produces the most graduates who could say as they walk across that stage, "My God, it worked." So I hope it works out for all of you. If you have any questions, if there's any last minute ones, let me know. If there's anything that's coming up in that chat. Other than that, do your learning, do your homework, look on that site, figure out what's there. And then if not, you can always reach out to the school and ask us some direct questions, and we'll give you direct answers. I wish everybody a great night. I want to thank specifically my staff who took their time to be here and to probably do a whole lot of typing so that I didn't have to, and I thank you for that as well. And I do want to just reiterate again to say it says something when this amount of staff are here giving of their time to do this, and you'll see that they're here throughout the course of the year for many different events. And my hope is that you'll be lucky enough to be in their classes or in their TAs when you come here in September. Thanks, everybody.